Alfred Swinscoe, a well-respected miner known to everyone in Pinkston, is enjoying a drink at the local pub with his sons. As the night progresses, Alfred steps outside for a moment, and just like that, he vanishes into thin air. No goodbyes, no signs of distress, just an eerie silence where he once stood. What could have happened to Alfred that night? How does a man, deeply woven into the fabric of his community, simply disappear without a trace? For over 50 years, these questions haunted his family and friends, casting a long shadow over the village of Pinkston. But then, in a startling twist, human remains are discovered buried deep in a field, reigniting a mystery that had grown cold with time. What clues did these bones hold? Who was responsible for Alfred's brutal end? And why did they go to such lengths to cover their tracks? The story of Alfred Swinscoe begins in the quiet village of Pinkston, Nottinghamshire, a place where the rhythm of life was dictated by the coal mines that surrounded it. This was a community where everyone knew each other, and the bonds between neighbors were forged in the shared hardships and triumphs of mining life. For generations, the coal mines had been the backbone of the village, providing not just employment, but a sense of identity. Men like Alfred Swinscoe were the pillars of this small, tight-knit society. Alfred was not just any miner. He was a well-respected figure in Pinkston. Born in 1913, Alfred grew up in a world where the coal mines were the lifeblood of the local economy. At the tender age of 14, he joined the ranks of the village men, working at Langton Colliery, one of the many mines in the area. His early start in the mines was typical of the time, as boys were often expected to follow in their father's footsteps, taking on the dangerous and grueling work of coal mining. Over the years, Alfred honed his skills and eventually became a cutter, a specialized and highly respected position in the mining world. As a cutter, Alfred operated the machinery that sliced through the coal seams, extracting large chunks of coal from the face of the mine. This was a job that required not just physical strength, but also precision and a deep understanding of the mine's geology. It was a role that came with significant responsibility, as the safety of the miners working behind him depended on his ability to accurately judge the stability of the mine's structure. But Alfred was more than just a miner. He was a man who had earned the affection and respect of his community through his dedication to both his work and his family. As a father of 6, Alfred's life was one of routine and responsibility. He was known to be a man of few words, someone who let his actions speak for him. His commitment to his family was evident in the way he provided for them, working long hours in the dangerous confines of the mine to ensure they were well cared for. Beyond his role as a miner, Alfred had another passion that endeared him to his fellow villagers: pigeon racing. Known affectionately by the nickname Sparrow, Alfred was renowned as the champion pigeon man of Pinkston. Pigeon racing was more than just a hobby for Alfred. It was a deep passion that connected him with a wider community of enthusiasts. By 1967, Alfred was 54 years old, and though he had spent decades in the mines, he remained as committed as ever to his work. His years in the colliery had not only honed his skills, but had also solidified his place in the community as a dependable and trustworthy man. His peers respected him not just for his expertise, but also for his steady presence in their lives. The evening of January 27, 1967, began like many others in the village of Pinkston. Alfred made his way to the Miners' Arms, a local pub that served as a social hub for the village's mining community. The Miners' Arms was more than just a place to drink. It was a place where stories were shared, friendships were strengthened, and the burdens of the day were momentarily lifted. On this particular night, Alfred was accompanied by 2 of his sons, Gary and another whose name is not widely mentioned in reports, along with a few close friends. The group gathered around, enjoying their time together as they shared stories, laughed, and reminisced, a typical way to unwind after a long day's work underground. At around 10:30 p.m., after an evening of camaraderie, Alfred handed his son some money to buy another round of drinks. He excused himself to use the outside toilet, a common feature of pubs in that era, where modern plumbing was still a luxury not afforded to many establishments. However, after stepping outside, Alfred simply vanished. The night, once filled with the warmth of companionship, took a sudden and chilling turn. Despite being surrounded by people who knew him well, none reported seeing him leave the area or engaging in any suspicious behavior. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only unanswered questions and growing concern. When Alfred failed to return home, his family's concern quickly turned to fear. This was not like him. Alfred was a man of routine, and his sudden disappearance was entirely out of character. The next morning, a search was quickly organized by local residents and authorities. They scoured the village and surrounding areas, retracing Alfred's steps and questioning anyone who might have seen or heard something that could provide a clue. Despite their best efforts, no trace of Alfred could be found. The police were notified, and an official investigation was launched, focusing on his last known whereabouts and the people he had been with that night. The investigation, though thorough, was hampered by the limitations of the time. The technology and forensic methods available in 1967 were rudimentary by today's standards. The lack of physical evidence and reliable witness accounts made it difficult to build a clear picture of what had happened. As the days turned into weeks, and then months, the case grew cold. Alfred's disappearance became one of the village's enduring mysteries, a tragic chapter in the life of a community that had seen more than its share of hardship. For decades, the question lingered. What had happened to Alfred Swinsko on that cold January night? How could a man, so well known and well loved in his community, simply disappear without a trace? The lack of answers left a void in the lives of his children and grandchildren, who were left to grapple with the loss of their patriarch and the mystery of his fate. It wasn't until more than 50 years later, on April 26, 2023, that the first significant breakthrough in the case occurred. The discovery came in the most unexpected way. On that day, construction workers were busy with routine excavation on a remote piece of farmland in Coxmore Lane, Sutton in Ashfield, an area just a few miles from where Alfred had vanished all those years ago. The land, now being repurposed, had once been a quiet, unassuming stretch of countryside, a place where few would have thought to look for answers to a decades-old mystery. As the workers dug into the earth, they struck something unusual. What initially seemed like just another day on the job quickly turned into a scene of heightened tension and curiosity. Buried approximately 4 to 6 feet deep, the workers uncovered what appeared to be human remains. The discovery was startling, and the site was immediately shut down as local authorities were called to investigate. The scene that unfolded was reminiscent of the many crime dramas that often play out on television, but this was real, and it was about to reopen a case that had long been consigned to the history books. The remains were old, very old. The initial examination by forensic experts suggested that the bones had been in the ground for many years, possibly decades. This finding alone was enough to steer the investigation toward cold cases from the surrounding areas. Among these, the case of Alfred Swinsko quickly rose to the forefront. Alfred's unsolved disappearance in 1967 had left his family and the entire community of Pinkston without answers for more than half a century. Could these remains finally solve the mystery that had haunted so many for so long? The remains were carefully exhumed and transported to a forensic laboratory for further analysis. Despite the passage of time, forensic scientists were able to extract DNA from the bones. This was a painstaking process, requiring the latest in forensic technology to ensure that even the smallest fragments of usable DNA were recovered. The stakes were high. This could be the moment that Alfred's family had been waiting for. In a stroke of what can only be described as forensic fortune, the DNA extracted from the remains was compared with samples provided by Alfred's surviving family members. These family members, though having long since resigned themselves to the possibility that they might never know what happened to Alfred, had never given up hope entirely. The match was conclusive. The remains were indeed those of Alfred Swinscoe. But it wasn't just the DNA that provided the final piece of the puzzle. Alongside the remains, forensic investigators discovered a few personal items that had remarkably withstood the test of time. Among these items were 2 distinctive socks and a shoe, mundane objects that, in this context, took on immense significance. These items, though weathered by the years underground, were still recognizable to someone who had known Alfred well. They were shown to Alfred's grandson, Russell Lowbridge, who had been just 4 years old when his grandfather vanished. Seeing these items triggered a wave of memories for Russell, memories of his grandfather, and of the stories he had heard growing up. Russell contacted the authorities, confirming that these were indeed Alfred's belongings. The discovery was a poignant reminder of the man who had been lost for so long. The forensic examination of the remains revealed grim details about Alfred's final moments. It was clear that he had suffered significant injuries before his death. The evidence indicated that he had sustained a major stab wound, along with blunt force trauma to various parts of his body. These injuries pointed to a violent encounter, one that had likely ended in Alfred's murder. Additionally, his hand was found to be broken, a sign that he may have tried to defend himself from his attacker or attackers. The condition of the remains also suggested that Alfred had been killed at a different location before his body was moved to the burial site at Coxmore Lane. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the case. Someone had gone to great lengths to cover up the crime, transporting Alfred's body to a remote area where they likely believed it would never be found. The location of the burial also raised significant questions. Coxmore Lane, although not far from Pinxton, was a remote and secluded area in the 1960s, accessible primarily by vehicle. This detail led investigators to theorize that a car must have been involved in transporting Alfred's body, which was a crucial point given the context of the time. In 1967, car ownership in Pinxton was not widespread, which meant that the pool of potential suspects was somewhat limited. The notion that a vehicle had been used added a new dimension to the investigation, as it narrowed down the list of individuals who could have been involved in the crime. With these new discoveries, Nottinghamshire police found themselves at the beginning of a new chapter in the investigation. The identification of Alfred's remains, after so many years, reignited the case, giving detectives a renewed sense of purpose and urgency. This wasn't just about solving a cold case. It was about bringing closure to a family that had lived with uncertainty for far too long. The discovery of the remains was a bittersweet moment for Alfred's family. While it brought some measure of closure, it also reopened old wounds and brought new questions to the surface. Who was responsible for such a violent and calculated crime, and why had they gone to such lengths to conceal it? The reinvigorated investigation led detectives to start retracing their steps. They began by interviewing individuals who had known Alfred during his lifetime, focusing on those who had been in the area during the late 1960s. Witnesses who had seen Alfred in the days leading up to his disappearance, and particularly those who had been at the Miner's Arms on the night he vanished, were crucial to reconstructing the events of that night. The detectives also delved into historical records, including work schedules from the colliery where Alfred worked and medical notes that might offer clues about his physical state or any potential conflicts leading up to his death. Months of meticulous investigation finally paid off in August 2024 when the Nottinghamshire police made a significant breakthrough. They identified 2 potential suspects linked to Alfred's murder. Both individuals had violent histories, and one had a criminal record that included an assault conviction from April 1966, just a year before Alfred's disappearance. The injuries sustained by the victim in that earlier case were eerily similar to those found on Alfred's remains, leading detectives to consider the possibility that this individual could have been involved in Alfred's murder. However, this breakthrough came with its own set of challenges. Both suspects were deceased by the time Alfred's remains were discovered, which meant that the police were unable to directly question them or bring them to trial. This limitation complicated the pursuit of justice, but it did not deter the investigators from continuing to piece together the truth. The identification of these suspects was a significant development, offering a clearer picture of who might have been responsible for Alfred's death and what their motives could have been. Despite the challenges, the Nottinghamshire police remained committed to pursuing all possible leads. Their determination to leave no stone unturned has kept the case in the public eye, with continued appeals for anyone who might have information to come forward. Even after so many years, there remains hope that new evidence or witness testimony might emerge to finally close this tragic chapter in the history of Pinxton. But as the investigation edges closer to a resolution, the lingering questions grow ever more poignant. One can't help but wonder, what drives someone to such violence? Why was Alfred targeted? And what secrets from that fateful night remain buried along with him? Could there still be someone out there who holds the final piece of this puzzle? If you have thoughts on these questions or theories of your own, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. What do you think was the motive behind Alfred's murder? And how do you believe the passage of time has influenced the investigation? If you found this case as intriguing as we did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries and cold cases. By joining our community, you help keep these stories alive and maybe, just maybe, bring us one step closer to the truth.